Hey gang, I'm hoping you'll enjoy this week. I've been thinking about it, and I think that with what's going on in the news and locally, I know several of us have received some news that we thought's a little bit discouraging. Well, it is discouraging, and some of us live in confusion. School has ended, and oftentimes it's like, what do I do with the summer, or what do I do next, or what do I do with my own life? I think it's important that we remember something that we saw in Experiencing God Bible study, but I don't want to go through the whole Bible study tonight, especially. I just want to talk about one thing, and that fact is that God is always working. Now, this excites me a little bit because of the fact that I used to live in fear that I would miss what God was doing and I would miss God's will. And maybe someday I would show up in heaven and find out that God was disappointed in me because I had not been able to discover what He wanted me to do and where He wanted me to be involved. And that He had been sitting there going, I've been trying to talk to you and you just weren't paying attention. But in Experiencing God, we find that God is always working and that He shows the people He loves. He shows His own children what He's doing, and that is our invitation to get involved. So as I'm going through these scriptures and talking to you briefly, I want you to think about, what are you seeing that God is doing? Maybe in your own family, maybe in your life, maybe in your job, maybe in our community, hopefully in our church. What do you see that God's doing? And as we do that, you're going to get to mention or a time at the end of this meeting tonight to discuss what do you see God doing? And how do you feel that you're supposed to get involved? What do you think He's telling you to do? And even hopefully, what do you see in our church and our group? And what do you see that God is wanting us to do? We may be small, but we're God's people. And we're here for a purpose. We were started with a purpose. God always has a purpose. And so what do you see that God is wanting to do in us? Now, the scriptures, John 5, and in verses 17 and 20, Jesus was speaking. He was justifying Himself because He had just done a miracle on Sunday, or on the Sabbath, which is Saturday for the Jews. And they're mad at Him because He's violated the Sabbath. He's done something. And here's what it says. It says, in His defense, Jesus said to them, my Father is always at His work to this very day, and I too am working. You see what He's saying? He said, God has not stopped working. And often we think that maybe that was just in Bible times. Maybe that was just in Jesus' day, or maybe that was a long time ago. But God is the same yesterday and today and tomorrow. He never changes. And so if God had not ceased working then, He's not ceased working now. And Jesus said, for this reason, they all tried all the more to kill Him. Not only was He breaking the Sabbath, but He was even calling God His own Father, making Himself equal to God. Jesus gave them this answer. Now listen, verily, truly, or very truly, I tell you, the Son can do nothing by Himself. He can do only what He sees His Father doing, because whatever the Father does, the Son also does. For the Father loves the Son and shows Him all that He does. Yes, and He will show Him even greater works than these, so that you will be amazed. You catch what that's saying? He said, look, God is always working, and He loves me, His Son, and He shows me what He's going to do, or what He is doing. And when I see God doing something, I do it also. See that? I do whatever He does, and He will show Him even greater works than these, so that you'll be amazed. God wants to do some stuff that will amaze the world. And again, even though we're a small church, God will do it through us. He wants to amaze the world through us. Now, maybe that'll help you understand later on, getting closer to His crucifixion. Jesus was talking to His disciples, and He said in John 14:12, okay, same book, John chapter 14, verse 12, He said this. He said, very truly I tell you, whoever believes in me will do the works I have been doing. Now, what's the works Jesus has been doing? I used to think about miracles and raising people from the dead and all of those things. But as I look at these passages, now I think more of, what were the works Jesus was doing? He had been doing what He saw the Father doing. Okay? And he says, whoever believes in me will do the works I have been doing, and they will do even greater things than these, because I am going to the Father. So Jesus says, look, if you believe in me, you're going to do what I've been doing. In other words, you're going to see what the Father is doing. You're going to join in, and you're going to do those works. And through that, God is going to do even greater things through you than he's done through me. And again, I used to think in the idea of miracles, raising the dead and all that, but as I've grown and as I've just seen how the world works, I think about the fact that Jesus worked 3 years, basically, on this earth. And the church has been going for 2,000 years. And his followers have done much more. We have reached much more of the world. We've reached much greater number of people. We've reached people on all parts of the planet. We've reached generations, whereas Jesus preached to one small crowd in one small nation on the planet for 3 short years. And as you look at it that way, yes, we really are doing much greater works than Jesus did. We're having a much greater outreach because we jump in, we see what the Father does, and we do it. Of course, we do it through Jesus' power. We do it in Jesus' name. He did say he would be with us always, but we have that power, and we have that blessing and that promise. And now look what he said in the very next chapter. He said this in John 15, verse 8. Okay, John 15:8, he said this, "This is to my Father's glory, that you bear much fruit, showing yourselves to be my disciples." You see what's God's glory? That we bear fruit, that we get out there and do things and make an impact, and the world sees us working, and he says, or the world says, man, they are doing something for God. That glorifies God. When we get in there, we do what we see God doing. We realize God is at work, and we join in. Now, with that said, I want you to think about a few things. You got some questions here, and I'm not going to discuss them. I'm going to let you discuss them in group, but I want you to think about this. In the Old Testament, since God is always the same, he was doing this in the Old Testament. He showed people what he was doing, and then that was their invitation. That was their command from God to get involved. So with that in mind, I just picked 3 people at random. But I picked Joseph. He was a slave in Egypt. He was the poorest of the poor. He was in slave and in prison, finally promoted into Pharaoh's court, finally leader of the nation, really. But I want you to think of this. What did God show Joseph that he was doing? And what did Joseph say in the long run that what God was doing in return? Okay, what happened through Joseph? What did God do? But in all of that, what did he show Joseph there in Egypt that he was going to do? Same thing with Moses. Moses was living out in the desert, married, raising his kids, having a job, taking care of sheep. But God come along and showed him something. God said, look, Moses, here's what I'm going to do. What did he see? What happened? How did Moses get involved? Just like how did Joseph get involved? And then, to be fair, not to just pick men, let's look at Esther. Esther was a young lady there living her own life, probably had her dreams, may have been thinking about marriage someday. And then here along comes something that God shows Esther that he's doing there in Persia. And how did Esther respond? And what did God do as a result of that? And all that, I want you to think then in your life. Okay, after you talk about that, think about in your life. What is God doing? What have you seen him doing lately? Maybe in your life, maybe in the community around you, maybe in our church. What do you feel God's saying that you should jump in? Or with that said, what do you think you should jump in? And as people talk, feel free to comment and add your input and say, if you're seeing God do that, maybe this could be what God's asking you to do. Maybe this could be God's invitation for you. Or maybe even, as you think about it, this could be God's invitation for our church, for our group, to jump in and do something. Now, I don't think everything that everybody sees necessarily means our church should do it, but I do think very often that some of the things people see are things that our church should jump in and do. But in all that, remember, I put a warning at the bottom, okay? Matthew 24:35. You don't have to read it now, but just realize that Jesus said that his words would never pass away. So if his words would never pass away, That's one very important principle you must remember as you look at God's will and God speaking to you and showing you things. And that's this: since His Word never passes away, if He ever said it in the Bible, it's still true. So God never contradicts Himself. God never tells you to do something that in the Bible He said don't do, or He said stop doing, or He said that's totally quit. For instance, very simple thing. God said He hates divorce. So God's not looking at you and saying, I want you to go get divorced so you can serve me as a single person. It just doesn't work that way. God doesn't want divorce, so He's not telling you to divorce in order to go out and be able to do His will. God doesn't tell you to steal things to do His will, to kill, to murder, to lie. All those things that He said in the Bible very clearly, He never contradicts that and tells us to do it as a part of His will now. So other things in the Bible that are more vague, but still the Bible teaches, He never violates that. But with all that said, what do you think God's telling you to do? I went a little long, but I hope this blesses you, and I hope it makes you realize God is at work. You're not alone. We've not been abandoned. You still have a purpose. What is it? Let's get involved. Thank you.